$100 million. That is how much Elon Musk bet on a company that he himself said had a 10% chance of success. 10%. And this was not some random angel investment in a friend's startup. This was everything. Nearly his entire PayPal fortune poured into a rocket company in 2002, when the last successful private rocket company was, well, there were none. There were literally no successful private orbital rocket companies in the history of humanity. And Musk looked at that track record, looked at his $100 million, and said, yeah, let me try. And honestly, when I started digging into the SpaceX story, like really digging, reading the biographies, reading the engineering reports from the early launches, reading the accounts from the people who were there, it hit me different than I expected. Because this is not just a story about rockets. This is a story about what happens when someone is crazy enough to bet everything on a vision that everyone, and I mean everyone, thinks is insane, and then nearly loses everything 3 times, and then changes the entire trajectory of human civilization. Let me take you through the whole thing. Okay, so you have to understand where Musk's head was at in 2001 and 2002. He is 30 years old. He has just been pushed out as CEO of PayPal, which, by the way, is its own wild story. But that is for another day. And eBay acquires PayPal for $1.5 billion. Musk owns 11.72%. He walks away with about $175.8 million after taxes. And most people in his position would buy a yacht, maybe an island, definitely retire. But Musk has this obsession. He keeps going to NASA's website looking for a Mars mission timeline. Like, he literally keeps checking, when are we going to Mars? What is the plan? And there is no plan, no timeline, nothing. NASA is not even thinking about it. And this drives him insane. He does something that only Elon Musk would do. He decides to buy a rocket from Russia. I am not kidding. In late 2001, he flies to Moscow with Jim Cantrell and Adeo Ressi. They meet with Russian rocket companies to try to buy refurbished ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, to use as launch vehicles. And the Russians, according to multiple accounts, basically laughed at them. They thought Musk was a naive American rich kid. In one meeting, one of the Russian engineers reportedly spit on Musk's shoes. They quoted him $8 million per rocket, which Musk thought was a ripoff. He goes back to Moscow a second time. Same result. On the flight home from that second trip, according to Jim Cantrell, Musk is sitting on the plane with a spreadsheet open on his laptop, and he starts calculating the raw cost of building a rocket from scratch. The aluminum, the fuel, the avionics. And he turns to Cantrell and says something like, I think we can build this ourselves. That spreadsheet on the flight home from Moscow? That is where SpaceX begins. Not with a grand vision speech, with a spreadsheet. So he starts meeting with rocket scientists. In early 2002, he gathers a group of aerospace engineers at a hotel near LAX. He invites 5 people to join what will become SpaceX: Michael Griffin, Jim Cantrell, John Garvey, Tom Mueller, and Chris Thompson. 3 of the 5 say no. Griffin, Cantrell, and Garvey are not interested, but Tom Mueller and Chris Thompson sign up. And let me tell you about Tom Mueller because his story is incredible. Mueller is an engineer at a big aerospace company called TRW, and he feels like his ideas are being lost in corporate bureaucracy. So what does he do? He starts building liquid-fueled rocket engines as a hobby in his garage. Then he moves to a friend's warehouse because the engines get too big for his garage. He is literally building rocket engines in a warehouse and launching them in the Mojave Desert on weekends with the Reaction Research Society. And in January 2002, Musk visits Mueller's warehouse, sees this engine, and asks one question: can you build something bigger? Mueller becomes employee number 1, and he goes on to design the Merlin and Raptor engines that power every SpaceX rocket flying today. Every single one. This is the kind of origin story that sounds like fiction. A billionaire walks into a warehouse and finds a mad scientist building rocket engines as a hobby. Space Exploration Technologies Corporation is incorporated on March 14, 2002. They originally abbreviated SET, which, let me just say, terrible name. They quickly change it to SpaceX. Smart move. And Musk puts approximately $100 million of his own money in. His own assessment of the odds? I thought we had a 10% chance of success, and that was being optimistic. He accepts that he will probably lose everything, but he believes they can at least push humanity a little further toward Mars. Now, here is where I want to introduce what I am calling the Impossible Bet Playbook. Because after spending an honestly unreasonable number of hours studying SpaceX and comparing it to other companies that attempted to do things that everyone said were impossible, I have identified a 5-step pattern, and I think it is genuinely the most useful framework I have ever come across for understanding how impossible things actually get done. Step 1 of the Impossible Bet Playbook. Question the price of everything. And I mean everything. This is the foundation of everything Musk does, and honestly, it is the thing that separates SpaceX from every other rocket company that has ever existed. Before SpaceX, rocket launches were absurdly expensive. A NASA space shuttle launch cost about $1.5 billion. That is $54,500 per kilogram to low Earth orbit. And nobody questioned it because that was just what rockets cost. The aerospace industry had operated on cost-plus contracts for decades. The government tells Boeing or Lockheed, build us a rocket. Boeing says, it will cost X. The government says, fine, we will pay X plus a profit margin. There is literally no incentive to reduce costs. None. And I want to tell you how this system actually worked, because it is almost comically inefficient. Let me give you an example. A valve that you could buy commercially for a few $1,000s would cost NASA $50,000 or $100,000 because it had to be space-rated. What does space-rated mean? It means it went through a certification process that involved extensive documentation, multiple reviews, testing at government facilities, and years of paperwork. The valve itself was not necessarily better than the commercial version, it just had more paperwork attached to it. And NASA had no incentive to fix this because the money was not theirs. It was taxpayer money. And the contractors had no incentive to fix it because they got paid more when things cost more. The entire system was designed to be expensive, not by malice, just by structure. And Musk walks in and does something that sounds obvious but apparently nobody had ever done. He looks at the raw materials that go into a rocket and calculates their cost. And the raw materials, the aluminum, the steel, the copper, the carbon fiber, the fuel, they cost about 2% of the typical price of a rocket. 2%. The materials in a Falcon 9 rocket cost somewhere around $500,000 to $700,000. The rocket sells for $62 million. That is a markup of roughly 100 times. And Musk says, that is insane. Why is there a 100x markup between raw materials and the finished product? The answer is labor. Overhead, subcontractors, bureaucracy, and the complete absence of competitive pressure. So he decides to build everything in-house, vertical integration. And when I say everything, I mean everything. SpaceX builds their own engines, their own avionics, their own flight computers, their own fairings, their own heat shields, even things like the spacesuits for the astronauts. They manufacture about 80 to 85% of their rocket components internally, compared to traditional aerospace companies that outsource most of their manufacturing. And here is why this matters so much. When you outsource a component, you are paying not just for the component, but for the subcontractor's overhead, profit margin, liability insurance, documentation requirements, and the overhead of managing the subcontractor relationship. Each layer of outsourcing adds cost. So by bringing everything in-house, SpaceX eliminated entire layers of cost multiplication. Is it harder? Absolutely. Do you need a bigger team? Yes. But the cost savings are enormous. And this, more than anything, is what allowed SpaceX to eventually bring the cost per kilogram to orbit from $54,500 on the space shuttle down to about $2,720 on Falcon 9. A 20x cost reduction. That is not an incremental improvement. That is a revolution. Step 2 of the Impossible Bet Playbook. Survive the Valley of Death. Because between having a great idea and actually proving it works, there is a valley of death, and for SpaceX, this valley was the most brutal I have ever seen. 3 failures, 3 rockets exploding, and each one nearly killed the company. The first Falcon 1 launch happens on March 24, 2006, from Omelek Island in the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands, this tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And the rocket fails less than 1 minute into flight. A fuel line leak causes a fire. And the cause? A fuel line nut that had been corroded by saltwater spray from the tropical environment. A nut. A corroded nut. Billions of dollars of technology and ambition brought down by salt air eating through a piece of metal. And actually, here is a detail that makes this even more frustrating. A later review by DARPA found that the nut had been properly tightened. The locking wire was still intact. The team had done everything right procedurally. It was the environment that got them. The salt air on this tiny Pacific island had quietly, invisibly eaten through the metal over weeks. Nobody could have seen it coming. And that is the cruelty of rockets. You can do everything right and still fail because of something you never even thought to worry about. The rocket crashes back into the reef near the launch pad. Gone. Now, quick side note. The team that works on rebuilding after this first failure, they are demoralized, but they are not broken. And here is a detail I love. Most of these engineers had come from places like Boeing and Lockheed Martin, where a launch failure would trigger a 2-year investigation with congressional hearings and mountains of paperwork. At SpaceX, they figure out what went wrong, fix it, and start building the next rocket. That culture of rapid iteration, of treating failures as data points rather than catastrophes, that is what separates SpaceX from every aerospace company that came before it. The second launch is on March 21, 2007. This one gets much further. The rocket reaches 186 miles above Earth. But then the second stage engine shuts down prematurely because of a fuel slosh problem that causes the rocket to roll out of control. Another failure. And this one is almost worse than the first, because they got so close. They proved the rocket could fly, the first stage worked perfectly, and then one problem in the second stage ruins everything. And then the third launch, August 2nd, 2008. And honestly, this is the one that breaks my heart, because it starts perfectly. The first stage burns beautifully. Everything is going great. And then, at stage separation, a timing error. The first stage engine does not shut down quite fast enough, and when the stages try to separate, they bump into each other, instead of cleanly splitting apart. The whole thing tumbles and disintegrates. And the payload on this flight? 3 small satellites and the ashes of astronaut Gordon Cooper and actor James Doohan, Scotty from Star Trek. Their memorial flight destroyed by a few seconds of bad timing. This is brutal. Now, speaking of building things from scratch in brutal conditions, if you are a founder right now trying to create marketing content that actually works, I want to tell you about something that has been a total game changer for entrepreneurs I know. It is called AI Adsy. It is an AI tool that generates viral UGC and product ad videos. You can give it a reference video for inspiration, and it creates content designed to get 3x better conversions than traditional ads. If you are spending money on ads and not getting the ROI you want, seriously go check out AIAdsy.com. I have seen founders completely transform their ad performance with this tool. Okay, back to the rockets. So after 3 failures, SpaceX has enough money for exactly one more attempt. 1. If Flight 4 fails, SpaceX ceases to exist. And I need you to understand the context of this moment. It is late 2008. The global financial crisis is happening. Markets are collapsing. Tesla, Musk's other company, is hemorrhaging cash with only $9 million in the bank, days from running out of money. Musk is going through a painful divorce from his first wife. He has poured virtually his entire PayPal fortune into SpaceX and Tesla. He is so cash poor that he is borrowing money from friends to pay rent. His actual words about this period: "I never thought I'd have a nervous breakdown, but I came pretty darn close." And then something happens during the transport of the 4th rocket that almost ends everything before the launch even happens. The Falcon 1 is being transported in a Boeing C-17 cargo aircraft to the launch site. And during the flight, the rocket partially implodes because the repressurization from the C-17 exceeds what the SpaceX team expected. The rocket partially implodes inside the transport plane. Emergency repairs are required to save the vehicle. And I want you to picture this scene because I think it is the most intense moment in the entire SpaceX story. The team is on Omelek Island, this tiny coral atoll in the middle of the Pacific. They have been working 18 20-hour days for 6 weeks straight. They are exhausted, stressed. Many of them have not seen their families in months. They know this is the last shot. If this rocket does not reach orbit, there is no Flight 5, there is no SpaceX. Everyone goes home and updates their LinkedIn profiles. And Musk is there, on the island, watching. The man who has bet everything on this moment is standing there watching. The SpaceX team assembles the 4th rocket in just 6 weeks, using whatever parts they have available. And on September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 lifts off from Omelek Island. And I am telling you, the footage of this launch is one of the most emotional things I have ever watched in tech. The rocket rises, and you can hear people in the control room getting tense. They have been here before, 3 times, and 3 times it has ended in flames. The first stage burns clean. Someone whispers, "Come on." Stage separation happens, and this time it is clean, a smooth, perfect separation. The second stage ignites, and the room goes quiet, because they are watching something they have dreamed about for 6 years. And then, orbit. Falcon 1 reaches orbit, the first privately developed, fully liquid-fueled launch vehicle to successfully reach orbit in the history of humanity. Musk's reaction: speaking to about 500 employees at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. As the saying goes, the fourth time's the charm. This is one of the best days of my life. The team is elated and ecstatic. People feel vindicated. And look, I want to acknowledge something here. There were people who had been at SpaceX since 2002. 6 years. 6 years of working insane hours. 6 years of people telling them it was impossible. 6 years of watching rockets explode. And then, on September 28, 2008, they proved everyone wrong. That feeling, the feeling of vindication after years of doubt, I do not think you can buy that. I do not think you can manufacture that. It only comes from doing something genuinely hard and genuinely new. And it bonds the people who experience it together in a way that nothing else can. That bond, that shared experience of surviving the impossible, that is what built SpaceX's culture. Not perks or ping-pong tables or free lunches. Shared suffering and shared triumph. Step 3 of the Impossible Bet Playbook. Turn survival into a platform, because surviving is not enough. You have to turn the moment of survival into a springboard for everything that comes next. And Musk does this brilliantly. Less than 3 months after the Falcon 1 success, on December 23, 2008, NASA awards SpaceX a $1.6 billion commercial resupply services contract for 12 cargo missions to the International Space Station. And I want to give credit to Gwynne Shotwell here because she is the person who made this happen. Shotwell is SpaceX's employee number 7 or 11 depending on how you count. She joins in September 2002. Her background is mechanical engineering from Northwestern, and she is the one who negotiates this deal with NASA. She becomes SpaceX's president in December 2008 as a result. And honestly, Gwynne Shotwell does not get nearly enough credit for what SpaceX has become. Let me tell you her origin story, because it is great. She was born in Evanston, Illinois. Her mom was an artist, her dad was a brain surgeon. She studied mechanical engineering at Northwestern and spent over 10 years at the Aerospace Corporation before joining a small company called Microcosm. She was introduced to Musk by a colleague, Hans Koenigsmann, and in her first meeting with Musk, she told him that SpaceX needed a dedicated business development person. She had not planned to take the job herself, but 2 weeks later, she joined. 2 weeks, that is how quickly things moved at early SpaceX. Musk is the vision. Shotwell is the execution. She runs the day-to-day operations, manages the customer relationships, handles the government contracts, and keeps the entire machine running while Musk focuses on engineering and Mars. And without her, SpaceX probably does not survive the transition from scrappy startup to serious aerospace company. Every great founder needs a great operator. Musk had Shotwell, and I think the SpaceX story would be fundamentally different without her. And the timing. The NASA contract closes on December 23rd. 1 day later, on December 24th, Christmas Eve, Tesla's financing round closes at 6 p.m., the last hour of the last possible day. Payroll would have bounced 2 days later. In the span of 48 hours, both of Musk's companies go from certain death to survival. If either deal had fallen through, the entire Musk empire collapses. No Tesla, no SpaceX, no Starlink, no Mars mission, no Cybertruck, no Neuralink, no XAI. None of it. Every single thing that Elon Musk has built or will build traces back to 2 deals closing in a 48-hour window in December 2008. Musk himself said about this period. And I'm getting divorced, by the way. Add to that, that was definitely the worst year of my life. And I think there is something genuinely important for founders in understanding that the worst year of Musk's life was also the year that made everything possible. The near-death experience is often the thing that creates the conditions for everything that comes after, not despite the suffering. Because of it, the crisis forces clarity, it forces focus, it forces the question, what am I actually willing to die for? And Musk's answer, apparently, was rockets and electric cars, and he almost died for both of them, metaphorically speaking. Step 4 of the Impossible Bet Playbook. Solve the problem nobody else will touch. And for SpaceX, that problem is reusability. Because from the very beginning, Musk understood that the key to making space accessible is not just building cheaper rockets, it is reusing them. Think about it this way. If you flew from New York to London and then had to throw away the airplane, a plane ticket would cost about $300 million. Nobody would fly. That is what the space industry was doing, building $100 million rockets and throwing them in the ocean after one use. It is insane when you think about it. So SpaceX starts working on landing rockets. In 2012 and 2013, they build a test vehicle called the Grasshopper. It does 8 test flights, going up and coming back down vertically, including one flight to 744 meters. In 2015, they start trying to land Falcon 9 boosters on drone ships in the ocean. The first attempts fail spectacularly. There are some incredible videos of rockets tipping over and exploding on the drone ship. But SpaceX posts these failures publicly. Musk literally tweets compilation videos of rockets crashing, with captions like, "How not to land an orbital rocket booster." And people love it. Because it is authentic. It shows a company that is not afraid of failure, that is learning from every crash. And I want to give you a sense of how many times they failed at this before it worked. Because this is important. They did not just fail once or twice. They failed over and over. Rockets tipping over on the drone ship and exploding. Rockets running out of hydraulic fluid and spinning out of control. Rockets landing too hard and crumpling on impact. Each failure, they analyzed the data, identified the problem, fixed it, and tried again. And again. This is not genius. This is persistence combined with engineering discipline. Most companies would have given up after the third or fourth failed landing attempt. SpaceX just kept going. And then, on December 21, 2015, it happens. Falcon 9 Flight 20. The rocket launches 11 satellites into orbit, and then the first stage flies back down and lands vertically at Landing Zone 1 near Cape Canaveral. The first time in history an orbital-class rocket first stage achieved a controlled vertical landing after delivering a payload to orbit. This is, and I do not say this lightly, one of the great engineering achievements in human history. People at SpaceX headquarters are screaming, crying, hugging each other. Because this moment changes everything. It proves that reusable rockets are possible. And once you can reuse a rocket, the economics of space change forever. By 2024, SpaceX has completed over 500 successful booster landings. A single booster, designated B1067, has flown 32 times, 32 flights on one rocket. That is like an airplane making 32 round trips. Except it is a rocket. Going to space and coming back. Step 5 of the Impossible Bet Playbook. Build the impossible thing and then build the business on top of it. Because here is what I think is the most underrated part of the SpaceX story. The rockets are incredible, but the business is just as incredible. And the business is Starlink. Starlink is SpaceX's satellite internet constellation. They started launching satellites in 2019. And as of late 2025, they have over 10,700 satellites in orbit and 9 million subscribers across 155 countries. They are adding over 20,000 new users daily. The revenue numbers are staggering. Starlink generated about $7.7 to $8 billion in revenue in 2024, growing 83% year over year. In 2025, it is projected to hit 10 to 11 billion, and Starlink now accounts for roughly 60 to 65% of SpaceX's total revenue. And here is the genius of how this all connects. SpaceX uses its own rockets, Falcon 9, to launch its own satellites, Starlink, to generate its own revenue, which funds the development of Starship, which is the rocket that will eventually take humans to Mars. The whole thing is a self-funding flywheel. The rockets fund the satellites fund bigger rockets, the bigger rockets will fund Mars. No other space company has anything like this. And I want to zoom in on something here, because I think it is fascinating from a business strategy perspective. Musk initially wanted to offer internet in rural areas that had no broadband access, and that is what Starlink started as, but it has become so much more than that. In Ukraine, after the Russian invasion in 2002, Starlink terminals became critical military infrastructure. The Ukrainian military used Starlink for battlefield communication when Russia destroyed ground-based internet infrastructure. Suddenly, a satellite internet company designed to serve rural Americans was helping a country defend itself in a war. That was never the plan. But that is what happens when you build infrastructure at global scale. The use cases emerge that you never predicted. And then there is the direct-to-cell capability. SpaceX has launched over 663 satellites that can connect directly to standard cell phones. Not satellite phones, regular cell phones. Text messaging first, with voice and data coming later. This means that, eventually, there will be no dead zones on Earth, no place where your phone does not work. Think about what that means for emergency services, for hikers lost in the wilderness, for people in developing countries without cell towers. That is a business that could be worth hundreds of billions on its own. And the competitive landscape? It is devastation. United Launch Alliance, the Boeing and Lockheed Martin joint venture that had a monopoly on U.S. national security launches, they lost it. ULA's Vulcan Centaur costs about $110 million per launch, compared to SpaceX's $62 to $67 million. Arianespace in Europe? They once commanded 30 to 50% of the global commercial launch market. Now they are described as a shadow of their former self. Boeing's Starliner crew capsule has cost $6.7 billion since 2010, roughly twice what SpaceX's Crew Dragon cost, and its first operational flight has been delayed to no earlier than 2026. SpaceX accounted for 87% of U.S. orbital launches in 2024 and conducted 167 launches in 2025. They are not just winning, they are running a completely different race. And here is the thing that really drives this home. On May 30th, 2020, SpaceX's Crew Dragon launched astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley to the International Space Station. This was the first crewed orbital flight from American soil since the Space Shuttle retired in 2011. For 9 years, the United States had to buy seats on Russian Soyuz rockets at about $86 million per seat to send its own astronauts to space. SpaceX ended that dependency. They brought human spaceflight back to America, and they did it at a lower cost per seat, about $55 to $72 million, than Boeing's Starliner, which costs about $90 million per seat and is still not operational for crew missions. Boeing, the company that has been building spacecraft since the Mercury program, beaten by a company that did not exist 18 years earlier. And speaking of running a different race, I want to take a second to tell you about something for founders who are trying to level up their marketing game. AIAdsy.com is an AI-powered tool that generates viral UGC and product ad videos. You upload a reference video, and it creates content designed to get 3x better conversions than what you are probably running right now. I know multiple founders who have completely overhauled their ad creative with this tool. Whether it is Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, whatever platform you are running on, check out AIAdsy.com. 5 minutes could change your entire ad strategy. Okay, back to SpaceX. Now, the thing that everyone wants to know about, Starship, the rocket that is supposed to take humans to Mars. And, honestly, the Starship story is almost as dramatic as the Falcon 1 story. Starship is the biggest and most powerful rocket ever built. The Super Heavy booster has 33 Raptor engines. The whole stack is 397 feet tall. And SpaceX has been testing it in a way that, again, is completely unprecedented. The first full-stack test flight in April 2023 ended in a spectacular explosion. About 4 minutes in, the second test in November 2023 reached space, but the ship detonated. The third test in March 2024 got further, but broke apart on re-entry. And then, on October 13th, 2024, something incredible happens. Flight 5. The Super Heavy booster returns to the launch site and is caught mid-air by 2 giant mechanical arms on the launch tower, which SpaceX has nicknamed Mechazilla. They caught a 23-story, 250-ton rocket booster out of the sky with chopstick arms. I have watched the video probably 50 times, and it still does not look real. It looks like CGI. But it is real. They have now done it 3 times. And actually, here is a detail that blows my mind. The first 3 Starship test flights all exploded, and after the first one, which caused significant damage to the launch pad and rained debris over a wide area, the FAA grounded Starship for months while they investigated. Most companies would have been devastated by this. The regulatory delays alone would have killed momentum. But SpaceX used the grounding period to rebuild the launch pad, redesign the flame diverter, and prepare the next vehicle. So when they got clearance to fly again, they were actually more prepared than before the failure. They turned a setback into an advantage. This is such a SpaceX thing to do. The Mars timeline? Musk says he wants to launch 5 uncrewed Starships to Mars in 2026, arriving in 2027. They would carry Tesla Optimus robots for ground operations. He gives it about a 50% chance of being ready. Then in 2028 or 2009, the first crewed mission. And then scaling from there. 100 missions in 2030, 1.500 missions by 2033. And eventually, a self-sustaining city on Mars. And I want to be real with you about how I felt watching the Mechazilla catch for the first time. Because I have researched a lot of technology stories for this channel, and I am usually pretty analytical about this stuff. But watching a 23-story rocket booster, this massive cylinder of metal and fire, come screaming back from the edge of space, and then just stop, held in place by 2 giant mechanical arms. I genuinely got emotional, because there is something about watching humans do something that has never been done before, something that every expert said could not be done, that connects to something deep inside you. It is the same feeling people describe watching the moon landing, except we are watching it happen in real time. On our phones, and it is a private company doing it. That is wild. Now, do I think that timeline is realistic? Honestly, probably not. Musk is famous for extremely aggressive timelines. The original Falcon Heavy was supposed to fly in 2013, and it flew in 2018. Starship was supposed to be ready years ago. The timelines slip. But here's the thing about Musk's timelines that I think people get wrong. The point is not whether the timeline is accurate. The point is that the timeline creates urgency. It creates a culture of speed. It means that SpaceX engineers are working at a pace that no other aerospace company can match. And even if they miss the 2000-2006 Mars window, even if everything shifts by 2 or 4 years, they are still decades ahead of everyone else. The closest competitor is not even in the same conversation. So let me tie all of this together with the Impossible Bet Playbook. Because I think there are real practical lessons here for anyone building something ambitious. And actually, I want to talk about something that I think does not get discussed enough, the human side of SpaceX. Because it is easy to focus on the rockets and the numbers and the billions of dollars, but there are 17,000 people working at SpaceX. And the culture is by all accounts intense, brutal, even. 80-hour weeks are normal. People sleep under their desks before launches. The turnover rate is high. Musk himself has said things like, "Nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week." And look, I have complicated feelings about this. On one hand, the results speak for themselves. SpaceX has accomplished things that no other organization, government or private, has been able to do. On the other hand, at what cost to the people doing the work? This is the fundamental tension at the heart of every Musk company. The results are extraordinary. The human cost is real. And I do not think you can honestly tell the SpaceX story without acknowledging both sides. There is also the environmental question. Launching 167 rockets a year produces carbon emissions. The Starlink constellation contributes to space debris concerns. And the Starship test explosions have caused environmental damage at the Boca Chica, Texas launch site. These are real issues, and they deserve serious discussion. But I also think you have to weigh them against what SpaceX is making possible. Satellite internet for underserved communities, a backup for GPS systems, climate monitoring from orbit, and potentially a future where humanity is not a single point of failure species confined to one planet. Step 1. Question the price of everything. Before SpaceX, everyone accepted that rockets cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Nobody asked why. Musk asked why, and the answer was not physics. The answer was bureaucracy, cost plus contracts, and the absence of competition. The same principle applies to almost any industry. There are things you are paying for that cost 10 or 100 times more than they should, and nobody is questioning it, because that is just what things cost. Be the person who questions it. Step 2. Survive the valley of death. And let me be really specific about what surviving the valley looks like, because I think people romanticize it. Surviving the valley of death does not mean staying positive and believing in yourself. It means choosing between paying rent and funding your next prototype. It means lying awake at 3 a.m., wondering if you have ruined your family's financial future. It means your friends quietly stopping asking how the company is going because they feel sorry for you. 3 rocket failures, complete financial ruin, a 4th launch with no backup plan. If that is not a valley of death, I do not know what is. And the lesson is not that you should be reckless with your money. The lesson is that breakthrough achievements almost always involve a period where everything looks hopeless, and the people who push through that period are the ones who change the world. The ones who quit during that period are the ones nobody remembers. Step 3. Turn survival into a platform. The Falcon 1 success alone was not enough. It was the NASA contract that came 90 days later that turned a single success into a sustainable business. One victory buys you the right to compete, but you have to immediately leverage that victory into something bigger. Every success should be a launch pad, not a destination. I see so many founders who survive a near-death experience and then relax. They got the first customer, they closed the seed round, they shipped the product. And they take a breath. Musk did not take a breath. Within 90 days of the Falcon 1 success, he had a $1.6 billion NASA contract. Within 2 years, he was flying Falcon 9. Speed after survival is everything. Step 4. Solve the problem nobody else will touch. And I want to give you another example of this beyond SpaceX, because the pattern is so clear. When Amazon started AWS in 2006, the entire tech industry thought it was insane. A bookstore selling cloud computing? That is like a pizza shop offering surgery. Nobody wanted to touch the problem of scalable, on-demand computing infrastructure. It was too hard, too capital-intensive, too far from Amazon's core business. And now AWS generates over $90 billion a year in revenue and is the foundation of the modern internet. The problems nobody wants to touch are the ones that create monopolies. Back to SpaceX. Reusability was considered impossible by the entire aerospace establishment. Every expert said it could not be done. Every analysis showed it was not worth trying. And SpaceX did it anyway. And it changed everything. The problems that nobody wants to touch are usually the ones that matter most. Because if they were easy, someone would have already solved them. Step 5. Build the impossible thing, then build the business on top of it. And honestly, this might be the most important lesson of all 5, because a lot of visionary founders build incredible technology and then have no idea how to make money from it. They are so focused on the engineering that they forget about the economics. SpaceX did not just build reusable rockets. They built Starlink on top of reusable rockets. They created a revenue engine that funds their ultimate mission. The technology is the foundation, but the business model is what makes it sustainable. Vision without a business model is just a hobby. A business model without vision is just a job. SpaceX has both. And I keep thinking about Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin as a contrast here. Because Bezos founded Blue Origin in 2000, 2 years before SpaceX. He has poured billions of his personal fortune into it. And Blue Origin has achieved, well, not nearly as much. Their New Shepard does suborbital tourism. Their New Glenn heavy lift rocket just completed its first orbital test flight in 2025. Meanwhile, SpaceX has done 167 orbital launches in a single year. Same amount of time, same access to capital. Arguably more capital from Bezos, actually. Completely different results. And the difference is not money. The difference is culture, speed, and the willingness to fail publicly and iterate fast. Bezos built Blue Origin like an Amazon subsidiary. Careful, methodical. Musk built SpaceX like a startup on fire. And in aerospace, where the problems are genuinely hard and genuinely new, the startup approach won. And here is the thing that I keep coming back to. The numbers. Because the numbers tell the real story. SpaceX was valued at about $27 million in 2002. Today, late 2025, it is valued at approximately $800 billion. That is a roughly 30,000x return. In 2003 years, the revenue has gone from zero to about $15.5 billion annually. They have 17,000 employees. They have launched over 10,700 satellites. They have landed rockets over 500 times. They account for over half of all orbital launches on Earth. One company, half of all the rockets launched on the entire planet. And Musk's original question, the question that started everything, when are we going to Mars? It is no longer a question about intention. It is a question about timing. Because SpaceX is going to Mars, they are building the rocket right now. They are testing it right now. The question is not if, it is when. So here's what I will leave you with. Because this story, more than any other story I have ever researched, makes me believe that the line between impossible and inevitable is thinner than we think. In 2002, everyone said private orbital rockets were impossible. By 2008, SpaceX proved them wrong, with a corroded nut, a 6-week rebuild, and a 10% chance of success. In 2015, everyone said landing orbital rocket boosters was impossible. SpaceX proved them wrong on a December night in Florida. In 2024, everyone said catching a rocket booster with mechanical arms was science fiction. SpaceX proved them wrong with Mechazilla. The pattern is always the same. Impossible, then improbable, then inevitable. And right now, taking humans to Mars is somewhere between improbable and inevitable. The technology exists, the money exists, the only question is timing. And here is one more thing I want to leave with you, a thought that has stayed with me since I started this research. In about 50 years, maybe sooner, someone is going to be born on Mars. A human child will take their first breath on another planet. And when that happens, when we trace back the chain of events that made it possible, it will lead back to a guy on a plane from Moscow with a spreadsheet, a corroded nut on a Pacific island, a rocket that partially imploded inside a cargo plane, and a team on Omelek Island who refused to give up when the rational thing to do was quit. Elon Musk said, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." He also said, "Failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough." $100 million on a 10% chance. 3 explosions. Borrowing money from friends to pay rent. A rocket imploding inside a cargo plane. And then a $800 billion company that catches rockets out of the sky and is planning to colonize Mars. That is the Impossible Bet Playbook. 5 steps. Question the price. Survive the valley. Turn survival into a platform. Solve the unsolvable problem. Build the business on top of the impossible thing. And you know what I think about when I think about this story? I think about all the people who were right to say it was impossible. Because in 2002, it was impossible. No private company had ever done it. The economics did not work. The engineering was unproven. The odds were genuinely, mathematically, overwhelmingly against SpaceX. Every person who said this will never work was being rational. They were being reasonable. They were being smart, and they were wrong. Because sometimes, rationality is the enemy of progress. Sometimes, the only way to do something that has never been done is to be unreasonable enough to try. It all started with a guy checking NASA's website for a Mars mission that did not exist.